Prepare for trouble!
Make it double!
To protect the world from devastation.
To unite all peoples within our nation.
To denounce the evils of truth and love.
To extend our reach to the stars above.
Jesse!
James!
Team Rocket, blast off at the speed of light!
Surrender now or prepare to fight.
So good. Daniel, we're
Meow.
back.
Well said. Yeah, we're back.
We're back. Dear viewers, I'm joined again by Daniel Vidal. He's the man who first uncovered the skull of Spinosaurus mirabilis.
Cheers.
Our last video together reached 22nd on YouTube's hype charts in the USA last week, which is incredible. This week, we're going all out, answering your audience questions alongside guest appearances from Dino Guy, Paleoanalysis, Your Dinosaurs Are Wrong, paleontologist Ashley Hall and Skywalker, the Dino Facts, and many, many more wonderful faces who should all be very familiar to you if you have a paleo-themed algorithm such as mine. This video is a party, and everyone's invited. Daniel?
And also we are going to be showing an amazing explosion of artwork that, has happened. I mean, it's taken us, overwhelmed us. It's almost 100 artists who have submitted Spinosaur drawings for this video. We're really touched. It's something.
It's incredible. And all artists will be credited on screen, links to their pages in the description below. Please show your love and support for artists, both established and up and coming. Artists are the lifeblood of science communication, and channels like this would be nothing without them. So it's an honor to feature so many here.
Well said. I was just going to comment that I'm an old fart, and I didn't even know what that hype thing means, but I suppose it's good, so...
It's a new thing. It's very exciting. It's very important, Daniel. Very happy to be hyped. Thank you, every viewer, for leaving some hype. And if you want to leave some hype for this video, you can do it. People loved your enthusiasm on the last video. So, and I was somewhat conscious in it. I kind of cut a lot of things out because I knew it had to be accessible, it had to be quick, it had to be whatever.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of things we cut out. It's nice to do one where it's just like, it, here's everything.
DanVidalUnleashed.
DanVidalUnleashed. Back by popular demand. I had a few comments last week. Where's my title sequence? So here it is. Enjoy. Welcome back to People Are Fish.
If a whale is a mammal and a duck is a dinosaur, woodlouse is a crustacean, poodle is a wolf, and according to logistics going down the tree of life, then clearly people are fish.
So, Daniel, how are you? How's your week been?
Well, unfortunately I was a little sick, so it's been hellish on that front, but we are all the authors, but me in particular, I'm still recovering from all the overwhelm of, the amount of people who have just produced so much engagement from that paper. It's way out of the ordinary, I can tell you that. I was one of those kids who never grew out of their dinosaur phase. So I used to be kind of, reclusive because I didn't play soccer or other boy stuff. So to see that many people really sharing the interest in something that I've had a little part in discovering, it's, little Daniel is very happy.
Very happy to hear it. Are you ready for the first question?
Oh, absolutely. Bring him on.
Thanks for having me, Elliot. How's it going, everybody? Steve here from Paleoanalysis. Dr. Vidal, thank you for taking the time to answer our questions. So my question, or rather, I actually have two questions, has to do with the crest of Spinosaurus mirabilis. Now, by far, this is the best image we have to date of a spinosaurid skull, but we do have evidence that Spinosaurus Aegyptiacus had a smaller crest on the same region of its skull. Do you think that this is something that may have been a more common feature in other spinosaurids that we just lack the evidence of so far, like baryonyx or irritator? And what function do you think these crests may have served?
Steve, are you talking to Dr. Vidal?
Yes.
Did you ask him if he thinks Spinosaurus is going to grow wings by 2030?
Ignore him.
Thank you, Stephen Tip Tip.
That was awesome. Okay. So, I mean,
do you want to comment on the wings thing or shall we move on?
Yeah, I'm going to comment on the wings thing.
Yeah.
So we do not have a full forelimb from Spinosaurus. So we have the hind limb. We know the pelvis and, femur, tibia, fibula, and the foot from the neotype from a single individual. We do not have that for the forelimb, but we do have a lot of isolated, humeri, ulnae. Okay, I'm going to foreshadow something to come later this year, but we do know now what Spinosaurus radius look like. I mean, this is a super niche thing, but it is, as everything surrounding Spinosaurus, it's weird. We'll just leave it at that. And, we have many isolated metacarpals, phalanges, and claws that we know are Spinosaurus from North Africa.
Thank you.
So, as far as we know, the biggest difference in the forelimb of Spinosaurus regarding to other Spinosaurids is that it's got more of straight raking claws than the curved claws that Baryonyx or Suchomimus have. So, unfortunately, it doesn't have wings, and as awesome as that would have been, we don't believe Spinosaurus ever grew them or evolved them. But I thought it was a good way to talk a little bit about Spinosaurus forelimb and how it is. I mean, relative to the rest of its anatomy, it's not that unusual. It's got some unusual things, and I'm foreshadowing here, we'll be discussing in the future how these are more widespread than we knew, and I'll leave it at that. So it's not that special in Spinosaurus, while the foot and the sail are some, and now the nasal crest are its actual hallmarks and very distinctive features. And I also want to point out the meme of Spinosaurus growing wings. It means that we knew so little before 2014 about Spinosaurus anatomy that, the limbs and the proportions came as a surprise. Then in 2020, the tail, of which we knew very little, came as a surprise. But at this point, we got bits and pieces, basically, of all the skeleton of Spinosaurus. There might be, some proportion changes from now and the future, and as better specimens with more complete remains arise, so we can know the proportions more tight. But it's not going to change as dramatically as it did in 2014 or 2020 anymore. I can most certainly say that. And as for the other question...
I was going to say, I'm glad we answered in depth Tim's question, Ponder Steve's.
Yeah. So, as for the other question, all Spinosaurid nasals that we've got have crest. Actually, this is something that was very remarked in the osteology of Baryonyx. Baryonyx has a short bump, which is a little crest in the nasal. Then Suchomimus also has a low crest on the nasal that actually extends almost to the tip of the snout, which is why one of the names it was given to Suchomimus was Cristatosaurus. By the way, Cristatosaurus is not a thing. I can also foreshadow that.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to just give some background on that for people who don't know?
So, So here, let's travel back in time to 1998. In 1998, it's the year when Suchomimus was published. But at the same time, paleontologist Philippe Taquet from Paris and Dale Russell from Canada, they published two premaxillae, two snout tips that were collected by French expeditions in the 70s.
Uh-huh.
And they published those as Cristatosaurus. Unfortunately, they do not have any autapomorphies, and they have, and although it's gotten some discussion on how they differ from the 1998 snout that Paul Sereno discovered, we nowadays have way more premaxillae from Suchomimus than ever. and we've been able to line them up together and have them side by side, study their variability, and we do not find enough differences in the holotype of Cristatosaurus to really see it as an entity. But that's something that will be published in the near future.
Right.
Aside from that, back to crest. Yeah, Suchomimus has a ridge going from the orbits almost to the tip of the snout. Then Irritator and Angaturama, which they're either very closely related, if not the same species, also have that low ridge. And finally, we have, some unpublished specimens that also have crest, and of course, both Spinosaurus species have crest. So it seems that just like the hypertrophied neural spines that create sails, a little low in Baryonyx and Suchomimus, but way bigger in things like Ichthyovenator or especially Spinosaurus, it seems that it's a common feature of the group to have, nasal crest. It's only that Spinosaurus, like everything else, took it to the very extreme.
But going back to Steve's question, is it possible that we've missed it in other animals? John, he asks, how do you know the original one, Aegyptiacus, didn't have this horn? Because it didn't survive. Most of the skeletons are not complete.
We have... So first things, there's unfortunately, to my knowledge, not a single very complete nasal crest from Spinosaurus aegyptiacus. But we have enough specimens that preserve different parts where we can get to the point to have a very good idea what it looks like. And I'm going to screen share if that's okay.
Yep, absolutely.
What we've put together here in this figure of our paper is a composite of four specimens of Spinosaurus aegyptiacus. We've got this from the Milan snout, which is the very tip of the nasal. We've got this in other Spinosaurus aegyptiacus specimens. So we have this crest here, which is a fragment that Paul Sereno collected in his 1995 Morocco expedition. This is another 1995 expedition, and this is another 1995 fragment, and they overlap, so we can, put them together like this. The neotype also has a fragment of the crest, which is mostly eroded, but it goes from here-ish to right here. So we know the length of the nasal, we know the shape of the nasal, we know that it's got fluting here, and we know that it races from here, which is more elevated, up to here. This is going to come up later in the questions as I've peeked a little bit, but you see how this part here, right here, it's triangular. In Mirabilis, it is way flatter. And this region here is already elevated in Aegyptiacus. In Mirabilis, it goes almost to the end of the antorbital fenestra, really to start racing, as you can see here. It's raised here already by the beginning of the antorbital fenestra, while here it's almost past midpoint where it starts, raising up. And we don't find any evidence of this lateral eminence in any of the fragments from Aegyptiacus. So that being said, we know of a more complete crest of an animal very related to Spinosaurus. So we know its morphology, and it fits quite well with the pictures we have, with the picture we have from the different fragments of Aegyptiacus. So we are quite confident that the crest would have been different.
It's worth asking.
Of course.
British Business Gaming asks, I personally, it's very important, British Business Gaming, comments, I personally think the discovery was merely a Spinosaurus with a genetic defect, but of course you found multiple individuals.
We found 3 individuals with this, how did it call it, genetic deformity?
Yes.
Well, to be on point, if we would accept... I love this one with the Wi-Fi.
All these images you've been seeing are from Hundari Nundu, a great paleo artist I discovered this week. All of them are incredibly imaginative takes on the new find. I love speculation in art. It's just fun.
Oh, me too.
Yeah, great. But anyway.
So I'm just going to take this comment to comment a little bit on the hopeful monster. It is a little debunked, although in certain instances, especially, in bacteria and simpler organisms, it is something that could work, which is siltationism. Essentially, you get such a massive amount of mutation in an organism that it changes over one generation, and it creates what was called a hopeful monster that would be better adapted, or that could survive and thrive better, and therefore multiply with these, genetic mutation, this aberration. So this monster, because to the parent generation it would look nothing like them and it would be essentially a monster, would have its own future and develop as its own species. This is a very popular, although, for the most part debunked, especially invertebrates, model of evolution. But back to where we were talking Spinosaurus.
So you're saying evolution does not work how it does in X-Men? Is that what you're getting at?
At least not invertebrates that we know
okay.
of.
Yeah.
Or if it does, it's on very minor modifications. We don't find invertebrates these huge leaps in morphology. So essentially, no human is going to be born with clams. You know what I mean? With shell. But it's not impossible that, huge amount of change could happen in short spurs of time. But so far, punctuated equilibrium, which is this model where you don't have it over one generation, but in a short period of time, is something that is not totally, solid evidence on it, although the fossil record seems to show it. But, the fossil record has a huge bias where you could have, a good sequence of preservation, then have a gap for thousands or hundreds of thousands of years, and then over those hundreds of thousands of years you could have all the transformation, the little transformations pile up, and in the fossil record you would just flip a page. So it is complicated that genetic aberrations or genetic malformations would happen overnight. And in this case, given how consistent the morphology is between all the 3 crests that we found, it's more likely that this was a trait that evolved and was, selected over generations rather than a sudden genetic mutation.
Yeah. And as I saw on Dr. Dave Hohen's podcast, Terrible Lizards, he made the comment, as cool as this is, it's not super out there for this group to have a display structure, as Steve's comment in the first video said. All of these animals have some form of crests, so it's not super shocking that some of them would have taken it to more extremes.
Of course, in the way I see it is that this Spinosaurus seems to be in their evolution very driven to select display structures, because these became more elaborate as time goes on. And essentially it's kind of like the peacock's tail, where you've got males. We don't know if there's sexual dimorphism for sure in Spinosaurus. We have no evidence, but it's not unlikely that display structures, or either sexual dimorphism or, other types of display, would just go on hey, I can, be very coy about like, I'm very strong and I can take all this energy to these extreme display structures and still survive. What can you do? What's your game? You know, it's that kind of attitude from an evolutionary standpoint. That's what these structures mean. But they convey a risk, which is that you can get so fixated and so on rails on hyper developing them, then when you've got shortages of any kind, you're gonna suffer, because those are being selected by female, especially in the sexual dimorphism kind of scenario. And if those features are pushed and pushed and pushed to the limit, to the point where essential survival is at risk, the moment you've got harsh conditions, it's a very high risk for extinction. And I believe that Spinosaurines, in that regard, probably suffered from it, because they lived in a time when you got massive high temperatures, you've got massive sea races where you got continents breaking apart or becoming completely submerged. So that obviously had to affect the fauna and the flora. So Spinosaurus decided to take all its energy and resources into these structures at the worst possible time.
Dead Ender asks, what possible functions do you think the crest served aside from display? And are there any guesses about how it might have affected hydrodynamics of the skull, as suggested by Gimset and Gimset 2021?
So, we know that the sail of Spinosaurus is not a problem with hydrodynamics. The hydrodynamics of Spinosaurus are more affected by the limbs, because essentially the sail is just like a keel, and ditto for the crest. However, if you have a straight keel, that's one thing. But if you've got, like some of our crests, very twisted, that's going to create drag in a very negative way. So those individuals which had a extremely twisted crest, like the one on the holotype, for example, of Spinosaurus mirabilis, that's going to have a hard time trying to navigate water, because it's going to create so much drag. Essentially, the best hydrodynamic is the shape that submarines are crafted in, and basically it's just a huge cylinder with soft... I mean, it's essentially the shape of a cetacean or a tuna fish. You're trying to get, that cylindrical streamline feature with a little tapering to the end, so you can have the hydrodynamics perfectly, so you can be as fast as possible. And anything coming out, especially if it is asymmetrical, is going to create drag in terrible ways. That's why submarines don't have anything sticking out of them. They're literally designed to be as fast as possible
the best shape for swimming
underwater.
is a fish. Is that what you're...
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
And essentially, the shape of a tuna fish is one of the most efficient in sharks. That's why they have very specific shapes, and you don't see, extremely asymmetrical fins in sharks. So yep, that's it about hydrodynamics. If it was straight, it would not be that much of a problem, just like a shark's fin is good for stabilization. But the moment that you got individuals with huge asymmetries, that's not gonna work. Also, as for additional functions, I've been asked, what about thermal regulation for the crest, because it's so densely vascularized. But the dense vascular network is only at the very tip, which means that only a small fraction of the whole crest has a dense network of blood vessels, which means that the surface area and relative to volume of blood is going to be very small relative to the size of the whole animal. So I don't believe that it served any thermoregulation purposes because of that. And as for its use as an offensive weapon, I mean, it's not impossible that it could have been used in combat. Like, giraffes use their ossicones in combat. But, ossicons are blunt and not thin. Ditto for the horns of of cows and buffalo, and if youth or sheep, they tend to have circular cross sections. Even the antlers of deers are cylindrical in cross section. They're not flat structures, because flat structures are very prone to break if they're hit in the right angle. And even the thicker of crest of Spinosaurus mirabilis is very thin. So, yeah, I would not... I mean, I can't rule out that they use them that way at some point. If they were, headbutting and essentially it would hit an opponent. But I don't think it was selected for that, or its cross-section would have been way different.
Very good. And also in the paper, we touched on this briefly in the previous video, the parallels to cassowaries and how their crests grow.
Birds usually headbutt sometimes, and they may, hit a little bit with their casques, but it's not what those evolved for. Just by, the heat of the moment, it can become that function, but it was clearly not selected for that purpose. Otherwise, it would have been way more rigid. It would have been more solid, and it would have been and it would have a cross section which would be cylindrical, because that's more stable, essentially.
And Thomas Asher Official asks, we've kind of briefly touched on this, curious to know about the validity surrounding speculation of display structure in respect to sexual dimorphism, and can this be extrapolated to other large Spinosaurids? I suppose just skeletal sexual dimorphism is a good thing to kind of comment on. Like, do we see sexual dimorphism much in the fossil record? Can we apply anything to Spinosaurus?
Okay, so actually, I like a lot this reconstruction, and I did comment on it on Twitter, because I refuse to call it X. It's dumb. I did comment on it, and I mentioned that, okay, we know already that there's some variability in the crest of mirabilis, and again, we can't point our finger on that being a display structure that was sexually selected. But I'm going to screen share one moment and show what I'm talking about, what the variability is. But instead of showing the paper figure that I shared before, although I'm going to share that one too, I'm going to show the whole skull with the different crests on their most extreme versions, which I have not shown before. So on the paper, we published this figure, where we show all three specimens that we found, and we show them, unmodified, and then reconstructed as the whole nasal and reconstructed in the crest, but in the whole skull. But here you'll notice that I corrected the curvature on this one just to make a more direct comparison on how two equally non-curved individuals might have looked like. So we know these two extremes at least, but since we only have three of these, we don't know whether there were two groups, this and this. We don't know if there were, intermediate conditions between this and this. And we don't know even if there were further thicker crest. We don't know if it goes way thicker. I don't think that it would go a lot thinner, to be honest. But we don't know how many intermediates we have between here and here. And we don't know if they even went further in this direction when it comes to thickness. And just for fun, so this is, this is the skull that we put out, and this is the way it would look with a more, twisted crest as the holotype has it. And this is what it would look in the front. So, to answer that question, we know this is the actual variability. One of them could have been a male, one could have been a female, for all we know. We don't know, but it's not impossible that this is the case. And if we're going to speculate, I think it's more interesting to speculate on the base of what we've got preserved, rather than speculating that the females would have a shorter crest, because what are the odds of, discovering 3 crests and all 3 being male individuals? It's not impossible, but in my opinion, it's a little bit unlikely. Especially when they already display some variability. Though, we may be surprised in the future. We can never know.
Great. And I think on that note, we'll move on to our next question.
Are you playing a video?
Oh, yes, I am. Sorry, I forgot you.
You're not screen sharing. That's.
I was actually saying sorry. I forgot. Let me screen share.
Hi, Elliot. Hi, Dr. Vidal. This is Edge Science. My question is, about how large do you think the midline crest for Spinosaurus mirabilis would have been? And also, can you elaborate a little bit on the sauropods you guys discovered? Thanks.
We'll go back to the sauropods later, because there was a lot of questions about the site. But, yeah, we're just kind of continuing what you're talking about like how big could these crests be?
Okay, so for the size of the crest, by the way, these two are lovely representations of the most conservative and, something what could be not the most extensive, but way more extensive than the bone shows, and more extensive than we have depicted in the paper and our reconstruction. Thing is, for all we know, it could even be variable within individuals. Because there's a great paper by our co-author, Todd Green, on the casks of guinea fowls. He made an amazing paper studying both the bone and the keratin sheaths that cover them. And essentially what he found is that it's somewhat variable, and that some cassowaries will have huge casque, while others, not cassowaries, sorry, guinea fowls will have huge casque covered by keratin. Others will have equally big casques covered by way smaller keratin. And obviously they have sexual dimorphism in birds. So this is a guinea fowl with a very large head crest, and even larger and differently shaped keratin sheath. So these sheath extends the crest well beyond 40% its original surface and height. Meaning we were kind of conservative with these reconstruction. It could have been, as you can see here, way more. And by looking at at both reconstructions you were showing before, those could be the two extremes, because sometimes the keratin sheath will barely extend the crest, and in other cases it will, as you've seen, even change its actual bony morphology. So in reality, I have to say we can't know how extensive and how big the keratin sheath would have been, but we can speculate based on what we know. And what we know is that it's got a lot of vascularity. If it's got a lot of vascularity, we can infer or think that maybe it needed so much vascularity because it was feeding a lot of tissue. And now, okay, keratin is dead tissue, but it's got to be continuously renovated, like your nails that grow and your skin that sheds and hair that also grows. So all that vascularity probably was feeding a lot of, keratin replacement. And if it was replacing a lot of keratin, especially at the tip of the crest, maybe it's because the keratin amount was extensive. It's speculation. We can't really tell, but it's not unthinkable that it was way larger than we see just with the bone.
SARS asked, did the crest bend like a hook, or is that mainly just artist's interpretation?
Well, you've seen, we've just talked a little before about the dimorphs, and you see that some of those crests really bend to the side like a hook. It's preserved just in the holotype crest, but we know that cassowaries do that too. So no artist interpretation, it is as preserved.
Mm-hmm. And JTL Wego was just looking for clarity. Did I understand correctly that there are 3 crests found, but there were at least 10 specimens/individuals present at the site with various material?
Okay, let's clarify some of this. Some specimens, like the holotype, is just a skull. It's got many bones, but it's just a skull. We don't have any postcranium for that one. And some specimens, like one of those crests, it was found in isolation, so just the crest. We excavated around and we couldn't find anything else. While other specimens, like the second crest, was found next to a postcranium and other pieces of the skull. And that one we know from, cervical, dorsal, limbs, I think also part of the tail. So yeah, we got we got some variability in how much was preserved in those specimens. So some are fairly complete, because none of these unfortunately are very complete, but are very complete, while other are just isolated remains. But we've got at least 3 specimens with substantial material. One of them the holotype, and the other 2 are the one with the dentary and part of a limb and part of the tail. And the other is the second crest specimen, Gen 2, which has the most preserved out of any of the specimens. And then other specimens are maybe, snout. They are a maxilla. They are, tail vertebra, a dorsal vertebra, all in isolation. So a lot of those are unfortunately not as good as we would like, but 3 of those are complete enough.
You've got a friend in the room with you.
Yeah, I got a friend here. It's our dog Nina.
Hello, Nina.
And now she decided to curl up.
Now you got to be quiet. There we go. Fair enough. Great. Alex Berman asks, is there any chance that the horn had skin attached? I'm thinking of lizards with frills on their head, back and tail. But all the art of the species shows a solid horn. Can we be certain of the absence of skin with our current knowledge?
Well, if you look at the reconstruction of Suchomimus and Spinosaurus neck, it's curved in an S shape. If you look at that reconstruction that you're just showing, or at our own reconstruction, you will notice that the tip of the neck is almost as high relative to the sail as the crest. So any soft tissue probably would have, gotten in the way of the neck. We don't know if it did connect the back of the neck with the tip of the crest. We don't know. We just can't tell. It's for example, Amargasaurus, which for a long time had been depicted with, corny sheaths on the neural spines. Nowadays, we think it's most likely thanks to histology covered in soft tissue. So, yeah, I I wouldn't think it's impossible, but also there's no evidence to support it at all.
Angel Bjorn asks, how can you be confident that this apparent curvature reflects the original morphology rather than post-depositional taphonic deformation? Were there any analyses conducted to rule out distortion caused by the diegetic process?
So, essentially, we've got the following evidence. Number one, only the tip is deformed. The base of the crest is, and I'm talking about the holotype, the one that is sideways curved. Only the tip is tilted. It's very smooth. Sometimes when you've got, stronger deformation, you will see fractures. You're going to see a lot of different taphonomical elements. It's going to be flattened, maybe. So, but it's the thickest, so there's no compression forces working against it. We can't rule out that maybe some of that curvature is accentuated by taphonomy, but the rest of the skull is pristine. There's no crushing in it. It's got a very good, if you take the left and right maxillae, which were found separate and they were broken in pieces by erosion, and you put them together, you basically scan them in 3D and you flip one of them so that you've got two right or two lefts, and you match them, they match perfectly. So very little distortion going on in that specimen. Overall, ditto for the premaxilla. When we reconstructed the skull, we have a right premaxilla that we mirrored. And when you put that right next to for example, the Milan snout, which is beautifully preserved with no distortion, it's got the same morphology. So we don't believe almost the same morphology, not exactly because there's some slight differences, but those are not attributable to, crushing or shearing. So since the rest of the skull is pretty well preserved, we think, and the base of the spine of the nasal is perfectly preserved. Both prefrontals are just equally in morphology when we segmented them. So we don't think that that it's a taphonomy issue, or at least it was just barely affected by it, just because of that.
Great. Speaking of the amazing crest, I have a lot of questions from people asking where they could get their hands on it. Tank Slayer asks, where can I obtain a 3D model of the Spino skull? A 3D print would be cool. Jack Gunter asks, when can we expect a fully replicated specimen available at auction? Vo Jared asks, where can I find the STL? Daniel, when is this thing going to market?
Okay, it is not going to market. At least not replicas of the fossils themselves. Replicas of the skull, because that's a model that I crafted, may arrive in some form or another at some point, or the model that Danny Navarro created for his amazing piece of art. We've done a prototype 3D print in pieces that you can print as big as your printer will let you. So if you want, a maquette this big, you can have it if you want. But right now, models are already available. If you go to the paper, you'll notice that we have uploaded all the digital fossils that we used in the reconstruction to Morphosaurs. Morphosaurs is a repository online that has a restricted download policy. Essentially, you have to ask what uses you're going to give the fossil. So you've got like some boxes to tick, like I'm going to do research on it, I'm going to do education with this, or outreach, or it's just for personal use. Why do we do that? Because we've had issues with knockoffs in recent times. In 2022, we uploaded skeletons of Spinosaurus and Suchomimus, and we've seen 3D prints of them on sale in eBay. And it's pretty clear that they are ours, because when I sculpt something, I like to leave some, Easter eggs that I can recognize. And I could see those Easter eggs in the copies being sold. So at worst, they just took my model and made some modifications, to say, no, this is a unique craft, but it's modified. So the knockoff thing is, by the way, a plague in the replica market. You probably have seen these two Coelophysis curled up from Ghost Ranch pop up everywhere. So there are knockoffs that are, third and fourth generation cast of a cast in the market. Ditto with Stan the T-Rex. I know for a fact that many, if not most, copies around in Europe are knockoffs. These are second generation, and I know that for a fact. So, yes, we want everybody to be able to download these, but we want to be able to trace where any knockoff might have come from. So that's why we have people, personally request them, but they are available in Morphosaurus. So if you go to morphosaurus.org and type Spinosaurus mirabilis, you should be able to find all the uploaded 3D models. And if you've got a 3D printer and it's for personal use, you probably want, to have a 3D print of this very model on you. So yeah, they're available.
Last time we chatted, you mentioned the rights of the skull. Can we just go into that?
Yes. So this is a very dicey subject, because the rights to a fossil and its copyright usually belongs to the institution that it's curating it, and that institution would be, the Musée National Boubouama in Niamey, Niger. And they would hold the copyrights for the bones, the specimen. Essentially, it means that you cannot sell a copy of that specimen without, acknowledging rights and basically paying a share of the profit. Now, a skull reconstruction is a different subject, because you're making an elaborate on that. It's essentially the same as making a collage. And when you use, bits and pieces of many specimens to build a skull, you're essentially creating a new work of art. So essentially, this skull and this model, I did it. So technically, I would be the rights owner to the skull. So, but I don't want to make any profit from, reconstructing a dinosaur skull. I think that, that's why we put it online, so people can have their personal copies on it. But we have a non-commercial Creative Commons license, which means you can use it and you can distribute it, but you can't sell it. So either the original fossils you can't, because the copyright owners have to expressly authorize it. And as for our reconstructions, they are under a non-commercial license, meaning you can't sell it without authorization.
Good. There was a couple of comments. We touched on it briefly at the end of the last video, but obviously that was at the very end, and I think it's very important that people hear this. JC Gaming asked, hopefully they didn't take it home with them. It belongs to Niger. Obviously, Western paleontology and archaeology have a long history of taking things from countries and giving very little back in return, but times are changing, and this project, alongside other like it, are moving in a different direction. Can you just kind of elaborate on that?
So I'm going to comment on it. So this is a very delicate subject, of course, and it's a fine line between, how can, we know fossils are a very, and especially some as good as the Nigerian fossil heritage, how impressive that is for tourism and for, getting revenue for the area where it belongs to. And we know this from, the Royal Tyrrell Museum, for example. Drumheller, Dinosaur Provincial Park is beautiful, but the museum, the Royal Tyrrell Museum, gets so many visitors that go just to Drumheller in Alberta, just to see that museum. So we have precedent that is the thing. So, but to get a museum like the Royal Tyrrell Museum, you need investment and you need infrastructure. So Niger right now is lacking on both of those. They've got a national museum, the Musée National Boubouama, which is also a zoo, by the way. And I've been there and I've been in their collections. They are very limited on budget and they're very limited on space. However, regardless of that, I'm happy to say that many of the holotypes and the big skeletons that Paul Sereno excavated in the 90s are already back. And they've been back since somewhere in the early 2000s. So this is not something new. Paul Sereno really takes, ownership of the material very seriously. And he has a very big project called Niger Heritage to improve a lot both the exhibit and the curational facilities in Niger, both in the capital and in Agadez, which is the largest city in the region where these fossils come from, to really develop a way for Niger to really benefit from these. Because let's put it this way, any toy company selling Suchomimus plastic toys, they make a lot of money out of them. Dinosaur books, we know that the dinosaur industry, the pop culture dinosaur industry, makes a lot of money with dinosaur related material, and countries benefit very little from it. So the most direct benefit is tourism visits and all the industry that flourishes from tourism. Tourist economies have their own problems, and as a Spaniard, believe me, I know the most about it, of all the side problems that tourism can bring to a country. But when you've got, when you are the most poor country or the second most poor country in the world, as is the case of Niger, this can be really a way to leap up in that ladder and develop the country. So going back to this, Niger Heritage has this project to build 2 museums and 1 lab, but not just to build the museums, but also to start the phase that we have already started since a few years back, which is the training phase. Because what could you, basically a museum is just a building with an exhibit that is useless if you don't have a generation of, museographer, museologist, tour guides, scientists, and curators, and preparators, technicians that can, take care of all that. And that is also lacking. And that is also a complicated subject because, and again, in Spain, we face a little bit of that problem too, not as extreme, of course, but where you have somebody trained to be a paleontologist, but then, you want a job as a paleontologist in your country, and there are no positions. There's no companies. There's no place in the museum. There's no place in the universities because, where are those? What are they going to teach or what are they going to curate? So we need institutional compromise too from their end to be able to take these people who are being trained and have jobs so they can train the next generation from there. That is our goal. It's something that has already happened in, South Africa. It's happened in, of course, in Egypt. Egypt is a very crystal clear example of what we want with paleontology to happen in Niger. And, but we need really to push it forward. So this is a start, and I'm very happy that it is a situation that the fossils are always on loan. So essentially, they just go out because the facilities to work with them do not exist in Niger. But I'm also very happy to tell that we've already taken the first steps in building labs. In 2023, we were able to set up a small bake and shake lab with using the pre-existing archaeological lab that, by the way, and I'm going to use this as a little moment of pride, that the Spanish government helped set in the university in Niamey. And we used those facilities to prep the holotype, or parts of the holotype, specifically the snout, and of Spinosaurus mirabilis. So most of Spinosaurus mirabilis is still in Niger. We want to take it on a loan because we want to do, CT scans and a lot of tests that we can't do in country, and we want to properly stabilize them with materials that we can't get in Niger. For example, getting acetone, which is a solvent that we use for hardeners and consolidants. And I'm talking about industrial level acetone, not the one that you use to remove nail polish and things. So you cannot get acetone, industrial level acetone, in most countries in the world because it is used in illegal substance manufacture. So a lot of stuff we still need to take the material out, and it's always done with permits from the local government. It is done with a temporary export, and it's always legally bound to go back to the country of origin. These are never, for the most part, taken. And Niger, luckily, since 1997, has a very strict law, very similar to the one we've got in Spain, where fossils and their commerce are completely and strictly prohibited. So, by the way, if you see fossils from Niger pop up in fossil fairs, bear in mind, the country does not approve legally their commerce. So those specimens are poached, and you should notify it.
Very good. Thanks for going into detail. It's all very real-world stuff. Obviously, we like the animals, and we like the, these big prehistoric creatures, but, people are the first and foremost thing. And I think the most critical thing about this is paleontology is inherently a global science. Like, you have to involve local people and local territories. So anything we can do to progress and, change how that operates is incredible.
And by the way, there's a lot of interest in what we do when we are in Niger.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is when you talk to students, they always bring the same worry, which is real. Where am I going to get a job as a paleontologist in Niger? And that is one of the things that we're working the hardest on, for institutions to open up positions for them.
Great, thank you. But talking about Niger, that takes us on to our next question.
Hi, I'm Evan Jevnikar, Daily Dino Guy. My question is, what are your plans moving forward for this site and the region in Africa? So are you planning on going back to the site to look for more specimens of Spinosaurus or maybe other contemporaneous fauna? Or do you plan to explore more of Central Africa and look at some sites that are similar in age, but maybe represent different formations or maybe even different depositional environments? Thank you again so much. I really appreciate the insights.
So, as for return, we still have so much to process from that expedition that, if we are going to raise funds, it's to, hire people to prepare those fossils rather than going back to the field for who knows more. But I will say that in my own plans, going back to Chengebi is high on the list, because we spent there 13 days in 2022, and a day a half a day, just half a day in 2019. So we've been there under 2 weeks and made so many great discoveries already. But there are so many questions left, like how far does the exposure go? Because he was asking too, are there any similar areas in Africa? And yes, there are, particularly Gadofawa in Niger as well. Gadofawa has been known since the 60s by the scientific community when Philippe Taquet and the French, well, he was called upon the French uranium geologists to go study those dinosaurs that they found when they were looking for uranium in the Cold War scenario for their nuclear program. And Gadofawa has been known by locals for a long time. Allegedly, by the way, Gadofawa means, according to what Taquet wrote down in this book, the place camels fear to dwell, or the place camels fear to go. And we've asked locals, they never say that that's what it means. We also can't really get a meaning out of the name because, some place names just are words and have no immediate meaning for people. But I've seen a lot of camels go there when I've been escaping in Gadofawa.
Maybe not accurate. Yeah.
Exactly. So anyway, Gadofawa is extremely rich. We have a joke that paleontologist Didier Dutai made to me, and that is, if you go to Gadofawa and do not find a Sarcosuchus skull, you are terrible field paleontologist. That is only a hint on how common Sarcosuchus skulls are in Gadofawa. So it's just like Dinosaur Provincial Park or the Flaming Cliffs. It's one of these, Shangri-Las of paleontology, where it's almost a miracle how many amazing fossils there are and how well preserved they are. We got so many Suchomimus specimens. There's a place with a graveyard of ornithopods, Uranosaurus and Lurdusaurus, many of those. So, but it is not only very rich, it's also very extensive. It's kilometers and kilometers of outcrop that we can go and explore. And Paul Sereno did an amazing job in, looking for how big that area was in his 2000 expedition. And in doing so, he also discovered the archaeological site of Gobero. But he found where the outcrop stretched out to basically yield no fossils: north, south, east, and west. So we know how many and how big that area is. For Jangebi, we have no clue. We just don't know. We went to the limits where our wheels took us and the time we had took us, but we haven't, explored the whole outcrop, so we don't know how far it goes. So to a large extent, it is still uncharted land, paleontologically speaking, at least. So, yeah, I'm dying to go back to Jangebi at some point, but there's so much to process at this point that it's not for fossil collecting, but for scouting of, extension and other measurements that we would like to do as scientists.
Yeah, unfortunately, you can't
But
just
not
dig it
in the
out of the
near
ground
future.
and put it in a paper. There is a longer process to it. So, as addictive as it might be to try and find another one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. On that note, got another question from a friend of the show. For anyone who's been subscribed for a while, we've got Emily, and she sums up a question which we saw a lot in the comments.
Hi, Dr. of Vertebrate Paleontology Emily Keeble here. I've seen a lot of comments about whether Spinosaurus Aegyptiacus and Spinosaurus mirabilis could be the same species, but just different sexes or different growth stages. What led you to describe this as a new species?
Okay, so the crest was the main feature that was so different that we ruled out, as we've seen before, that they could be two sexes because it's way different. But then there's these differences in the skull, and I think that the most notable one is the more elongated snout. The more elongated snout essentially means that this animal was a little better at fishing, that at least at stalking fish, because he could submerge the snout a little deeper than Spinosaurus Aegyptiacus. We've done this comparison with other specimens of Spinosaurus Aegyptiacus, and not only the Milano snout. There's two more snouts very well known from Morocco. One is in the Natural History Museum in London, and the other one is in the Museum of Natural History in Paris. And they all have somewhat tightly packed back teeth, so we know that region is not as elongated in any of the snouts from North Africa. And same for other features like the nostril. I'm going to screen share a little bit.
Well.
And because the small skull from London has been brought up, I think, in one of the questions that I could see.
Fabian was the person who asked about the slender rostrum from the Chem. So thank you, Fabian.
Okay. So first here, I'm going to show the holotype remains as we knew them in 2021. So these are the maxillae. And you can see that the medial side is, especially on this one, which is the one we figured in the 2022 paper, is better preserved, the medial side. While this is more complete, it's got the anterior end. We wouldn't find the anterior end of this one until 2022, which is in the premaxilla. Unfortunately, it is covered by a crust of iron, so we need to make a CT scan of that at some point to really make this fit as good as possible. So what I did is, like I mentioned, I just combined them by mirroring this one. So this is what it looks. And you can see that we've got a very good idea on what this part of the nostril looks like, okay? So if we compare it just by adding a nasal of the same morphology, okay, because this part we reconstructed, this is the London maxilla of Spinosaurus Aegyptiacus. We've copied this essentially from the Milan snout, but it's very similar here. And you can see that the shape of the nostril is way different. It's taller here than it is here. And ditto for the ascending process of the maxilla, it tapers here, while here we found it round. So also that you can see in the bone that this is ascending, the maxilla here ascends, while here it dips down. So the shape of the snout, of the nostril is different. Same for the spacing of the teeth, same for the little bump that it's got in the premax. It's got, you can see here, this upturn here, a little bumpy nose. Those are very minor differences. And then there's the ankle bone. The ankle bone I find one of the most telling, because Suchomimus, Spinosaurus Aegyptiacus, other Spinosaurine TBA that we have, the one in Rioja Venatrix from Spain, they all have a very tall ascending process for the ankle bone, but in Mirabilis, it is very reduced. And that reduction, unique in the whole Spinosaurid group, I think is telling that it is probably different.
Great. So that's why it's a different species, but I Samoth asks what characteristics informed researchers that this is not a separate genus. Can you discuss what you look for?
So we first have to address that what is a fossil species and what is a fossil genus?
Yeah.
I mean, even in extant animals, if you go to a bird manual, you're going to see all the time, oh my God, sometimes these are the same genus, sometimes these are different genera. I mean, it's a difficult boundary. The genus boundary has a phylogenetic meaning. Essentially, anything within the same genus is going to be more related to each other than things outside of that genus. So that taxonomic part, it's quite important because it carries meaning, while a single species has no phylogenetic implications attached to it. So, why the difference? Because, and as we were mentioning, all those tiny differences in, spacing of teeth, elongated snout, the bump in the nasal, even the ascending astragalus process, or the shape of the nostril, they are within the what we would call intraspecific variability, to the point where in 2022, we noticed those differences, but we didn't think we had enough to name a different species because all the rest was so similar to Spinosaurus Aegyptiacus. So, to put it this way, the amount of similarities between both Spinosaurus species and the differences from their most close relatives are much greater than their differences. So we thought, okay, let's be conservative. Let's not create a genus that probably some people will find. Because the question of sexual dimorphism we knew was going to be on the table, but since we've got 3 crests, we think we got that out of the question because they also have variability that we don't see in the different crests of Spinosaurus Aegyptiacus. All the crests of Spinosaurus Aegyptiacus, all those fragments that I showed you before, don't have a lot of variability built into them. So, I think that we were just being conservative at not naming a genus, just as we were very conservative in 2022 at not naming a new species while we didn't have enough evidence to support it. Who knows, maybe when we, prep more material from Gengebi or go to the field and find more specimens from Gengebi, we'll find additional differences that will tell us, hey, maybe this guy deserves its own genus because the differences are just piling up. But for now, here's where we stand with the current evidence. And also, I'm going to make another tease. The most closely related coeval species to Spinosaurus genus, which is Oxalaya. Even Oxalaya has been lumped into Spinosaurus at some point. We don't think Oxalaya is... I don't know if I talked about that before, but the holotype of Oxalaya has some differences with the Spinosaurus, and I'm going to... I think I'm going to take a chance to delve on it a little bit. I think that is going to be in here. I did not have this prepared. This is a little,
I love a tangent. It's fine. This
This
is what this video is all about. It's going in depth. We skimmed over it last time.
So let's put it this way, that we have more to talk about Oxalaya than ever before, but I'm going to keep it for now to the pieces that we know we have from Oxalaya. That's the holotype. the lost holotype, which now is a plastotype, because we are fortunate that there are casts of Oxalaia, so we can still make some observations on it. Very lucky. I mean, we wish that this was the case for Spinosaurus Stromer's specimen. Here we've got, and this is life-size, by the way. This is the Milan snout of Spinosaurus Aegyptiacus. This is a mirrored right premaxilla of Spinosaurus mirabilis, and this is the premaxilla of Oxalaia. So you'll notice right away these festooning, these concavities that both Spinosaurus species have. These are to accommodate for the lower jaw teeth coming up, like a bulldog or a crocodile. We don't see them in Oxalaia. And for the proportions of the snout, for example, both species of Spinosaurus, they are wider. I mean, from this point on where the constriction happens, we call this a mushroom shape because it is wider than it is long, this part. Wider than long, while here it is a little longer than it is wide, so it's more like a square shape, although it's a little longer. So those two differences already tell us, okay, these two guys are more related than this one. And this is a little trickier. We cannot see this part well in Mirabilis because it's covered in iron. We are in need of a CT scan to remove that iron. But if we compare the palate of Spinosaurus Aegyptiacus to Oxalaia, there's no sign that this tooth here is essentially this tooth here. No, sorry. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, this tooth here is basically this tooth here. It doesn't seem that there's going to narrow here. It seems that this part here, which is actually part of the maxillae, it's engulfed in the premaxilla. In Spinosaurus Aegyptiacus, it essentially sealed. It's possible that this is ontogenetic, by the way, so maybe when we compare it in the young individual of Spinosaurus mirabilis, it may be open, because these may fuse later in life, we don't know. But we don't seem to see it narrowing here in Oxalaia. This is the most, want to believe because it's broken, so maybe it would have closed more posteriorly, but we did find that difference as well. And also, here you see these notches. Here, these accommodate the first dentary tooth in both species of Spinosaurus. We don't see such notch, but again, it is not very well preserved ventrally because of the condition of the site where this was found, which is a big conglomerate, essentially a lot of erosion going on. So you see Oxalaia, which is a different genus, or at least we consider still a different genus, has some differences that are not present between both species of Spinosaurus. And this is just, a very small piece of evidence. And I'm going to tease, we got a lot more.
You coming back to the show, right, Dan?
I hope so. I have a lot of fun coming here.
Good, great. Okay. Not just teasing the papers, teasing future episodes. Subscribe if you want more. JTL Wico asked that any size estimates from the skull reconstruction by Sereno in his live, it seemed like they matched the size of the reconstructed S. aegypticus skull. Was this meant to display the full size of the adult animal, or did they just scale it up compared to other species?
So I suppose they are talking about the 3D print that Paul is posing to in the pictures. So here's the thing. Because the snout of Aegypticus is a little longer, of Mirabilis is a little longer, as I mentioned, this part here is a little longer. If I upscaled both premaxillae to be the same width, for example, the skull of Mirabilis at that same measurement compared to the Milan snout, it just skyrocketed to something so huge that we thought, okay, no, this is not possible. It's a kaiju. It's too big. So what we did, we printed that exhibit piece to be the same length as the Spinosaurus Aegyptiacus reconstructed skull from 2014 that was subsequently modified in 2020, 2022. I think we did some upgrades in 2026. I think we've done some slight, cosmetic changes to the skull, but nothing too serious. But we've basically 3D printed them at same length. If we were to print them, as I mentioned, at the same premaxilla size, it would be way bigger. I mean, way bigger. 10 centimeters longer, maybe, which is noticeable, by the way. So, if we've got any notions on how big it actually got, we don't. What we do know is that the holotype, which is the longest skull that we've got, if we scale up the rest of the skeleton to it, and we did that thanks to Gen 2, which has an equally big snout and crest for all the pieces that we could, overlap between the two, we get an 8 meter to 9 meter long skeleton. However, none of the skull bones in the holotype of Spinosaurus mirabilis is fused. We could separate if you look at the CT scans of the crest, we can see the suture lines of the prefrontals very clearly. Very clearly, they are not fused. In Suchomimus, for example, we've got a brain case of Suchomimus with the nasal, and the prefrontals and the nasals are quite tightly fused. You cannot see a suture line in an adult. Ditto for the premaxilla and the maxillae. You've seen in the case of Spinosaurus Aegyptiacus of the Milan snout, the huge snout. The premaxillae coalesce and fuse one to another. You can barely see the suture line, and they overlap the maxillae, so they're very tight together. This is not the case with Spinosaurus mirabilis. Both maxillae are disarticulated; they're not fused. And ditto for the premaxilla, which is just one right specimen. We don't have the left one. So we know that the fusion of the skull is what we see. Is not, what we see in larger specimens, in more mature specimens of Suchomimus, for which we have histology, by the way, or Spinosaurus Aegyptiacus. So we know that it probably, in the absence of histological evidence, which we still haven't done, we don't have a thin section of Spinosaurus mirabilis as of yet. In absence of that evidence, we know that the fusion pattern of the vertebrae, which by the way are also open, and all the specimens of Spinosaurus mirabilis that we have unfused neural arches to the dorsal centra, which is something we don't even see in the neotype of Spinosaurus Aegyptiacus. So we know that it's a probably younger specimen than the neotype. We don't know if the neotype is a full-grown adult, because bear in mind that full size doesn't mean that all individuals reach that full size. I am 5'6", and some human beings are way taller than 6 feet. Some even are 6'2", 6'3". It doesn't mean I am less of an adult. Well, some people it might, because they have to help me reach stuff. But me being a short guy just shows how much of a range there is. So it is not unlikely that some adults were 10 meter long, or 30 feet long, and some grew to 40 feet or more in length, or more than 12 meters in length, or even 14 meters, because there's always going to be a range. So for mirabilis, we don't know how much further it grew. We knew that it would have grown more than the specimens that we have, but we don't have a full size limit for it. Unlike in Spinosaurus, where some specimens, like we have isolated, the Milan snout, we have some phalanges, we have some vertebrae, isolated specimens which tell us that this animal got huge. We don't know how huge it got, but we know it would have been bigger, definitely. And there's nothing telling us that it didn't grow as much as Spinosaurus Aegyptiacus. We just don't know it.
That does all somewhat tie into our next video question.
Hi, Elliot. Hi, Daniel. Skywalker here, paleontologist with Elevation Science. Here's my question for you. All known specimens of Spinosaurus mirabilis seem to be subadults. Do you have any predictions as to how the crest might have changed as it reached skeletal maturity? And could that affect how distinct it really is from Spinosaurus Aegyptiacus?
So this I'm going to, walk on my fingertips because it is teasing something that will be coming. We have juvenile remains of a Spinosaurine with histological evidence, so we know how old it is, how big it grew. I mean, how old it was relative to the size it had. And we've got, the same pattern of fusion of the vertebrae that we've got in Mirabilis. This is a smaller guy than Mirabilis, by the way. And we've got a pretty complete skeleton, and that includes the nasal. So we know how developed the nasal is in a juvenile of a Spinosaurine. And we've got adult nasals of Spinosaurines that are very similar in morphology. So without going into a lot of detail, we know that the full-size crest morphology was attained quite early in ontogeny. We don't know what it means. We don't know if it means that it is a species or individual recognition display device rather than a sexual selected display device. We don't know that. But we know that it developed quite early. And I will leave it at that until we publish on the matter.
Great. So I think you've summarized, yes, this is a new species. It isn't just a different gender or some genetic freak, which leads on to Bethany's question.
Hey guys, it's Bethany from BK Bones, and my question is, so you found a new species of Spinosaurus. What is the number one reason why I should care? What is it about this new animal besides the way it looks?
So, I think I've already hinted at this earlier in the talk, but I'm going to mention that in the case of Spinosaurus, it is very important how it looked. Why? Spinosaurus lived right before a small-scale extinction, but a global extinction. We know that little after Spinosaurus lived, Europe is going to be submerged underwater. North America and Africa are going to be split in two by epicontinental seas. The temperatures are going so high that the global average on planet Earth has been calculated by paleoclimatologists to be several Celsius degrees higher than it is today in the tropics. And this is mean global temperature. Actually, Spinosaurus mirabilis lived right by the equator, because Niger was a little lower in latitude than it is today, so it's basically by the equator, so it was probably extremely hot where it lived, sorry. So, why is it important? As I mentioned before, Spinosaurid evolution is basically a drag queen drag race. Essentially, all the queens are, competing to see who's got the most ostentatious and flamboyant display. And anybody who's seen RuPaul Drag Race will know this very well. And you can just take it so far before it's looking a little over the top, or it is, grown beyond what is sustainable by, in the case of biology, by the energy and, molecules that an organism can produce without, starving. So, why is it important? Because we know that, and we'll know more in this future publication that we're getting ready, that by the time Spinosaurus, both species are alive and Auxalia is alive, Spinosaurines have taken all the adaptations of the clade to the very extreme. So they've got their display, like I've said, to the limit. I mean, they are going far beyond what any other dinosaur has ever done with display, especially in the sail, but also in the headgear. I mean, they go to extremes that only later hadrosaurs are going to surpass, and some birds in the future. But they also taken their adaptation to piscivore lifestyle to the very limit. What does this mean? It means that they are. And also, by the way, they are growing larger than any other Spinosaurid in history. So, we've got a changing environment where these animals are especially hyper-adapted to a very specific ecological niche. And they are expending a lot of energy on display structures that serve absolutely no purpose in their survival. And on top of that, their diversity and their geological distribution has been narrowing. So that tells us that these animals were especially vulnerable to the changing world they inhabited, and they probably had a hard time surviving, and that's probably amongst the reasons that led to their extinction. So I think they help us conveying the story on how, different animals becoming too adapted and too focused on one thing can be vulnerable to extinction. And I think that is great to discuss extinction and climate change in the world we live in today.
Thank you. Very good answer. Which leads us to our next question.
Hello everybody, Nature's Compendium here. My question to you, Daniel, is as follows. What are some contemporary species of animals that lived with Spinosaurus mirabilis? And what could this tell us about the overall ecology of the Farrock Formation at the time?
Okay, so we know many of their contemporaries not from Jangevi, because we are just, starting to open that Pandora's box, but from Iguidi, where we found very limited remains of Spinosaurus mirabilis, but way more specimens of other theropods, and most notably, crocodiles. So, the first one would be the Abelisaur rugops. Rugops is a very well-known short-snouted theropod on a smaller scale than Spinosaurus. Then there's Carcharodontosaurus. In Niger, there is a second species which is named Carcharodontosaurus aegyptiacus. Actually, nowadays, there is a bit of contempt on whether Aegyptiacus is a new genus or not, because some phylogenies are retrieving them a little separated. However, I'm very happy to tell that we've got more remains of a carc from Jangebi, and we hope to be able to put more information in the table in the near future and, try to find out whether these are indeed separate genera or they are going to be the same. And as for crocodiles, oh my god, this is the paradise of weirdos, because, there are, your tiny crocs that like Aripasuchus, or, Anatosuchus, which is a duck-faced croc. But also the boar croc, Caprosuchus, which is amazing. It's got the same, lower canine teeth going up the skull like a boar. And it's also a magnificent fossil. The skull is amazing. I saw it in Paul's lab, and it's it's impressive. But we have also still to name some species of crocodiles from both Ecology and Jangebi that we've been discovering in recent times. And then there's the sauropods. It pains me because, as you probably guessed by my cup, I am a sauropod lover first, and I've just tangentially been derived to study theropods. But sauropods are my first and only love.
Yeah.
And I am very glad to tell that we are quite advanced now in the publication of some, not all, of at least 5 sauropod species that cohabited the Farak Formation with the Spinosaurus mirabilis. And they are quite a diverse lot in morphology. They're very disparate. So I think people are going to love it. And we have some amazing specimens to reveal to the world, and I'll leave it at that.
That's great. And thank you, that answers Moss on the Rocks question, because he was desperate to know about the sauropods. So thank you. Brontospirus Regular asks, I'm curious about the habitat, specifically the climate it inhabited. Was it a highly seasonal region, or was the river system pretty well watered all year round?
So we don't know exactly how seasonal it might have been because, like I said, we are still processing a lot of the information. We know that this river probably had some more violent episodes of deposition with thicker packages of rock in which the sediment is a little thicker. Those sediment don't contain fossils for whatever reason, but we find fossils on top and below those episodes of, more violent or abundant deposition of material. So we really don't think those are associated with, seasonal episodes. And since it's an equator locality, nowadays the equator has, it has a rain season. But it's not, like the savanna, in which those rain seasons really have an impact. The, rainforests normally don't have a huge impact by the rain season in terms of, vegetation going very dry. So I'm going to tell we really don't know how seasonal it is. We just know that probably it was very dense in vegetation because there's a huge sauropod population there. We know there are many sauropod remains, which means there had to be a lot of plant matter to feed them. We know also that these sauropods are very different in morphology, which means that the vegetation canopy had very different levels. And since other areas like, Egypt and Morocco are very scarce on sauropod remains, maybe those areas were not as suitable for them to live. But again, very little information to really know it.
That's great. The Galvanator 1029 was curious about the other dinosaurs found on the expedition and asked, what are you most excited for? Which has been unpublished. I mean, I suppose you sauropods, right?
I mean, yes. It's one of the... We got an exceptionally complete sauropod that the more I look into it, the more surprises it gives me. It's not going to be anything crazy. I mean, it is a sauropod. So don't expect something like, Spinosaurus level of development and it's not going to be a sailed sauropod or anything, or a sauropod with a head crest. No.
I was going to say, you found one with a horn, right?
It would have been cool, but no. So don't expect anything in that regard. But what we can expect from this specimen in particular, and I'm working really hard on it, is it's going to give a lot of information on the evolution of early titanosaurs. Anybody who knows a little bit of sauropods knows that titanosaur evolution right now is a mess. We are working with 3 different families of datasets. And while there's some, common ground between them, particularly what are primitive titanosaurs, is still very debated because they will come in and out different groups. Even very complete skeletons like Epactosaurus, for example, from Argentina is very complete, but it shifts around the tree like crazy. So we are in hope that this titanosaur, which has a lot of basal characteristics, will help tighten up that situation. So we hope to really, be able to finally tell, okay, what is the characteristics that this clade of titanosaurs has that differentiates it from this other one? Because right now, it's all tree topology based. Essentially, we just know, okay, this is a saltosaurid because it fell here by the analysis, but we can't really tell what makes a saltosaurid, and if you follow me, because it differs in every study what constitutes the group.
Lovely up by Jonathan there.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, I assisted him in this one before it was published.
Oh, great. It looks like good. Yeah, Joe Jennings commented to highlight the fact that in the video it was hunting in freshwater, but it was grabbing a coelacanth, which is today saltwater.
Today.
But the historical records from the Chem shows that it had a lot of diversity.
So, we got coelacanth remains from Jangebi and Iguidi. And it's a good point because nowadays, yes, it's true that coelacanths are marine animals. But, okay, I'm going to stop again because I gotta open the door for my dog.
Okay. Let the beast
She's
in.
the queen of the house.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, it is true that modern day coelacanths are marine and actually are deep water fish. So no surface predator is actually preying on them. But in the Cretaceous and in the Jurassic, we know that most coelacanths are actually inland freshwater fish. So, yeah, we know that probably it was feeding on them as well as other fish that we've been finding in the formation. We have several large-sized fish like Onchopristis, and we also have a giant polypterid fish. Polypterids are these early ray-finned fish that also have lungs and that are very, I mean, it's one of my most fun things to tell to students, because we evolved from Sarcopterygian lungfish. I mean, not current-day lungfish, but Sarcopterygians that have lungs like coelacanths and lungfish do. Sarcops have a single element, the humerus, connecting the fins to the body, while rain-finned fish, actinopterygians, have many little bones connecting their fins to their body. So had we tetrapods evolved from actinopterygian fish like polypterids instead of sarcops, there's a chance we would have had several humeri. So, those Hindu deities with many, many arms.
Mm-hmm.
You know where they evolved from.
Very good. Rolling Up Everest just commented, no, people are not even remotely fish. Do you have a comment on that?
Of course.
I'm thinking of your meme of Spinosaurus hunting down a human. And my next video on this channel is all about the animals of the Chem. I've got a series on that, and we're going to be talking about all the cool fish that were there, which Spinosaurus was probably munching
many
on,
fish from the Chem.
Many fish in the Chem, so stay tuned.
Including one polypterid named Serenoictis, which is the smallest polypterid as far as I know.
Right, next question.
Thanks for having me on, Elliot, and hello there, Dr. Vidal. I'm Omar, better known as the Dinofex. My question is pertaining towards the wading versus diving debate with Spinosaurus. I know that Elliot mentioned you're more inclined towards the wading side of things, so I wanted to ask what evidence is there for both sides of the debate, and what do you think disproved the diving theory? On top of that, what does this mean for Mirabilis, and could it help settle the debate in any way?
I've been looking forward to having you do this one.
That is a very extensive debate, and that could be a video on its own.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of videos I'm aware that discuss this very subject. So the main, at least the way I recall now, the main lines of evidence for the swimming, and more than swimming, which is important, we don't, us wading people, or I like to call this the hell heron hypothesis versus the diving Spinosaurus or aquatic Spinosaurus hypothesis, is that I think we all agree that Spinosaurus could swim. There is no doubt that Spinosaurus could swim. It would probably have been a terrible swimmer, like most theropods, except, for penguins and some diving birds. But it could swim. What we don't think it could do is dive. So, that out of the box, the main arguments for the diving Spinosaurus are the density on the bones. So, there's this thing called pachyostosis, but Spinosaurus is not a pachyostotic animal. Pachyostosis actually means that the bone is not only solid, but it also expands out. That is something that, whales have and some marine reptiles have. So pachyostosis essentially is to be less buoyant and be heavier and be able to submerge more easily. And what Spinosaurus has, in particular, the neotype of Spinosaurus Aegyptiacus, is very dense limb bones. The tibia and the femur don't have a medullary cavity, which means that they are completely solid. Now, that's one of the hypotheses, one of the lines of evidence. The other line of evidence is the tail. Because the tail looks like a fin, it was probably used to propel Spinosaurus underwater, and they did actually an experiment with a cutout of the sail in 2 dimensions. Now, in that scenario, the tail was a flat structure, but we know that most of the tail of Spinosaurus would have actually been, meaty. So that part is not as good as a paddle, for one. But still, most lizards that swim don't have sails, and they still use the tail to propel themselves. Probably Spinosaurus would have used the tail also to propel itself, in addition to the limbs. And finally, I think another line of evidence is the feet. The feet are very flat, and they are the middle finger is quite short relative to the fingers 2 and 4, and it's been hypothesized that there might have been webbing, like in dogs and other water animals. We don't know about that. There's no direct evidence so far, but in any case, the feet are somewhat small. Okay, so those are, and of course, the animal being a piscivore also plays a huge role in, of course, it being related to water. So those are the main lines of evidence for the submerged hypothesis. And now, the other side does not negate those lines of evidence, but we find that if we take them and we put them together with other lines of evidence, the whole package suggests a very different picture. Why do I say this? So, in 2022, we did this paper. We tested how buoyant Spinosaurus would have been with, small lizard-like lung, a medium-sized croc-like lung, and a huge bird-like lung. And neither of them could submerge very well. They would be buoyant at a depth greater than 2 meters, which is still very big. It means, Spinosaurus could be under 2 meters of water and be able to hunt huge fish while submerged. But it would have been buoyant. Okay, let's suppose that it could, like crocs, completely exhale all the air in its lungs and be more buoyant. Spinosaurus has an issue with the sail. The sail, unlike that of sail-fin fish, cannot be folded. If you guys have ever taken a surfboard or a plank of wood underwater, you will notice immediately what the most stable position is for it. Flat as a plank, it doesn't stay vertical without extra force being applied to it. This means for Spinosaurus that its more stable position is sideways, with the sail completely level with water. Now, unless, the thing was submerged and propelling itself the whole time, at the moment it rested, it would have started tilting. So we thought, okay, can it create enough force with its hand and its legs to steer itself back up if it wanted to rest? And we found that it can't. The hands and the feet are too small to create enough force to steer the thing back up. So that is a problem. So those lines of evidence tell us that Spinosaurus was not the best suited body for diving. It's just not very well built for it. On top of that, going back to the buoyancy, we find the vertebrae of Spinosaurus to be more pneumatic. Spinosaurids in general are less pneumatic than other theropods. They reduce a lot their pneumatics, but the vertebrae we have from the neotype are more pneumatic than those in Suchomimus, meaning it had more air space in its vertebrae. So the vertebrae are completely in disconnection from the heavier limbs. And another point in that is that the limbs in the neotype are one extreme of a continuum. Other femurs from Spinosaurus that we found in the Chem, we've CT scanned them and we see that they have a medullary cavity. It is very reduced, that is true. It is way more reduced than it is in Suchomimus. But it is still a cavity. So we know that Spinosaurus probably had a gradient between, having a little cavity and having no cavity at all, like the neotype. And in Mirabilis, we find the cavity, the medullary cavity, is as reduced as in those, at least in the tibia, which is the only bone we've got a complete cross-section from. It is a very reduced medullary cavity. This goes to saying that, number one, and I'm going before summarizing, I'm going to say something else. If we look at the skull, because one paper published a few years back published that the eyelids, the orbits of Spinosaurus would have been up like a croc. And that is not the case. That is definitely not the case. It was a misinterpretation of a school roof. We know that the orbits from Spinosaurus are to the sides, like most theropods, and the nostrils are lower than the orbit where the eye would have been, meaning that it would have, for it to go to breathe, it would have gone something like this, while in crocs you see only the tip of the snout on the eyes in the surface when they are stalking. All right. We know also that the snout of Spinosaurus, both species, is extremely well adapted to stalk at fish from the surface because it can stay submerged while the nostril is airborne and can breathe, while the neurovascular terminations of the snout, which are very numerous, can gather, stimuli from closely swimming fish. So it can, like in the trailer from the dinosaurs that it's going out on Netflix real soon, catch a fish. So, yeah, that we're seeing now by paleoarts. This, we know Spinosaurus was extremely well built to do. Also, out of all Spinosaurids have very well developed muscles for bringing their head and their necks down, way more than other theropods, with the exception of Sinraptor. But out of them all, both species of Spinosaurus have the most developed osteological correlates for these muscles. That means that they are very good at having heads underwater, bringing their neck down and their head down, and they got a fish trap. A fish trap is what we've mentioned, these interdigitating teeth, which are conical with a diastema, that means a space between them, which means if they catch a fish, it becomes latched between up and down, piercing, which we've shown in the cover art by Dani Navarro. And that trap prevents a slippery object like a fish from sliding off the mouth. Okay, fair point. Fish trap are also present in fully aquatic marine reptiles. That is true. So it's a piscivore adaptation, not a wading adaptation. But overall, marine animals don't retract their nostrils, and aquatic animals don't retract their nostrils. Crocs have them in the tip of the snout. Ditto for other marine reptiles. They don't retract the nostrils. The nose retraction is an adaptation to, stalking fish from the surface. So, all in all, Spinosaurus Aegyptiacus, which we've been talking, we've gone, some brushes here and there of Mirabilis, but Aegyptiacus is way better built to hunt from the surface like a heron than it is built to dive and hunt underwater. Those are the facts. Does it mean that it couldn't dive? I mean, we find it's very hard, but if it could compress the lungs like a croc, maybe it could dive, but it would have been terrible at it. It certainly was not as good enough at, staying still underwater for being a ambush predator from down up like modern crocodiles are, because, it would flip to the side if it wanted to stay stationary underwater. And it is not near as hydrodynamic as any fish in the world, so it could not have propelled hunting fish underwater because it would have never been as fast. So ambush is out of the way because it would, tilt to the side. So even supposing it could have dived, it would have been a terrible diver for any ecological role underwater. However, it is extremely well adapted at wading and hunting from, the surface down. So that's our lines of evidence. And in regards of Mirabilis versus Aegyptiacus, Aegyptiacus and Mirabilis have some differences that we've been mentioning all around, but the parts where they are identical, they're just so similar, including the reduced medullary cavity and the limb bones, but also the overall morphology of vertebrae and pelvis and femur. The fourth trochanter, we've got a preserved fourth trochanter of the femur, and it's identical to the one in Aegyptiacus. So essentially what I'm going at is that there's nothing telling that Mirabilis was way different in its adaptations to the aquatic medium from Mirabilis. However, we may find further remains from Mirabilis that tell us differently. But as it stands now, there's nothing that sets them apart really in regards to their water adaptations. So there it is. A very long answer to a very complex topic.
About a suitable length, I think, for the history of it. It's great. Brill. And you mentioned the sail, which brings us on to this question.
Hey guys, Dino Guy here. So my question is fairly straightforward. Do we have a rough size estimate of the sail for Spinosaurus mirabilis? And, of course, would that sail be prioritized for display purposes? That goes for Aegyptiacus too, because, of course, there's always a lot of confusion about what exactly that sail is used for.
So I suppose he's asking for that in mirabilis?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
We have not a single complete dorsal vertebra in mirabilis like we do in Aegyptiacus. Much less a complete sail. So we know that it's got hypertrophied neural spines in the dorsal vertebrae. We know that these dorsal spines have the same overall shape that they do in the neotype of Spinosaurus Aegyptiacus. That means they are quite thin in the main body with longitudinal striations. They are solid on the inside with a very funny internal cavity, very small cavity, but not a cavity exactly, but like this pattern of radiating colors in the interior that suggest more vascularity in the medullary cavity. At the base of the dorsal vertebrae, they've got an expansion, like a bulge, and they narrow down in the base of the spine. So the base of the spine is narrower than the vertebral body. That much we know. We also know from the tail that the neural spines are also cylindrical, and they are taller than the neural arch, but we don't know how tall they could go because they're all broken. So we know that the comparable sites where we've got vertebrae have a sail. We don't know if the shape would have been the same or not. So that's why we have chosen to be very conservative and leave the same overall shape. Is it possible that the shape was different? I mean, from what we see in the crest, absolutely it could have been different. We just don't have any evidence for it. So we know that the structures, the parts of the body where there's a sail in Aegyptiacus, we also have evidence for a sail in mirabilis, but no information on the whole height or shape. Higher than in other non-Spinosaurus Spinosaurines for the moment. So basically, the biggest chunks of spines we've got from mirabilis, they're higher than in Ichthyovenator, Suchomimus, Baryonyx, or the tail end unpublished Spinosaurine. That we know. As for the function, we don't really think that it's a very good radiator or it's specially adapted as a radiator. Like, imagine the elephant ears. They are very, very vascularized, and they lose a lot of heat. So they help the elephant lose heat. So we are not sure that the sail of Spinosaurus is equally vascularized. So any role in thermoregulation, I mean, it's a big structure and probably could absorb heat, but we don't know how efficient the transfer from that heat in the skin would go to the circulatory system. Probably it would have been fairly good, but we don't believe that it evolved for that purpose, even though, you know, it probably could absorb and dissipate heat because it's got a wide surface area. And a good surface volume ratio, by the way. But if it had evolved for that purpose, why other giant Spinosaurines don't have them? Because they are way more reduced than other Spinosaurids and Spinosaurines. So it all smells like, you know, development for species recognition and display rather than thermoregulation. Because let's point at this again. Spinosaurus lived in tropical areas where the temperatures in the whole planet on average were higher than in current day tropics. So probably it served to help to dissipate heat, but we don't think it evolved directly for that, because as with the head ornaments, they are not specifically well designed, because other structures like Stegosaurus plates, for example, Stegosaurus plates, they are very dense in vascularity, so they look more like a radiator than Spinosaurus neural spines. So there's that. We don't know if it used it for it. It potentially could have, but we don't believe it was the main driver of evolution.
Moving on, we got a question from Jimmy.
Hey everybody, Jimmy here from Dinosaurs Will Always Be Awesome. Now, I always like to think of dinosaurs in their ecological sense and how they actually function in the environments and the roles that they filled in those ancient ecosystems. Now, with Spinosaurus mirabilis showing more of a river-focused and inland lifestyle, it makes me wonder, does it have a different trophic feeding impact on its environment than, say, Spinosaurus aegyptiacus did? Could this be less about another Spinosaurus and more about the difference between like a panther and a bobcat sharing overlapping territory? They've got similar body plans, but different prey choices and hunting strategies and ecological pressures on their systems. What do you think about that?
Okay, so we know that both animals lived, one closer to the water, the other further from the water, but we know that both inhabited essentially rivers, river banks, closer or further from the ocean. We know that the fish fauna in both locations is quite similar overall. And the other fauna that accompanies each of them is quite similar. So the ecosystems in both places are somewhat similar, with the exception of sauropods, which seem to be either less prone to preservation, or they were actually pretty absent from the coastal environments in North Africa. Although there are sauropods, it's not like they're completely absent, but they were in reduced numbers. So, could they have fulfilled different ecological roles? I mean, absolutely. They could have even preyed on different fish, for all we know. But as we've mentioned before, their adaptations for hunting fish and being aquaphilic animals are almost the same. So there's nothing really telling us that one would have a very radically different lifestyle from the other. Maybe their diets were somewhat different, maybe their behavior were different, but there's no good evidence that we can point at that, yes, this is definitely a sign that they were ecologically very different. Like there is, for example, when we compare Suchomimus to either of them.
Marcos asked, one of the two sites yielded more than one individual as Spinosaurus mirabilis. So this could suggest that they were more social animals?
So we've found several individuals, but we have not found any quarry with more than one.
Right.
So we know they are fairly abundant, just like they are in North Africa. We find many teeth. And by the way, that goes to all our fossil finds. They are within a very restricted area, but there's no direct association with any skeletons of anything. Not the sauropods, not the carnivores. So we really, I mean, we don't see a burial that deposited more than a single animal together in the same place. So as for how social it was, it probably, I mean, both species of Spinosaurus probably were very social, because we see all that display gear, and that display gear probably had a big role in their society. I mean, in their
probably not an
society,
introvert if you put that much effort in.
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
You don't do that just, to scare off other predators, especially when you are pretty much in a niche where you are the top predator, because, I mean, we don't have huge crocodiles like Sarcosuchus in that environment.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have, other giant dinosaurs that were hunting the same prey. So Spinosaurus was basically king of its environment. Yeah, we don't think we don't think that it was not social, but we don't know exactly what kind of group behavior they display, where they herd travelers, where they was just gathering together like crocs do. We we have no direct evidence for that. So all signs point to, yes, they probably were in groups and somewhat social, but we don't know what the structure would have been or what the relationships between the different animals would have been if they were just together by coincidence, just hunting prey, or if they were organized in societies like some birds are. We don't know.
Great. This next username confuses my dyslexia. It is Blue Sky Bluify asks, what would cause such a concentration of predator bones? How far did the discoverers, paleontologists, have to range to find all these parts? You kind of just touched on that.
So what could have caused if we only had predator bones, we would have a very similar scenario to North Africa, but here we have essentially a 50-50, kind of situation where we have a lot of predators, but we also have many sauropods. It's very different still from places like the Morrison Formation, where Allosaurus remains, even though they're somewhat abundant, are way less abundant than the Diplodocoids or Camarasaurus, which you can find them by punishment. So we believe that we get a high concentration of predators because there was a lot for them to feed on, and their numbers could grow accordingly in those environments, which is different from the case of the Morrison Formation. And this is something to do with what was called Stromer's riddle, in why so many huge predators and so little prey for them to hunt. And eventually Stromer's riddle is basically becoming a combination of preservation bias and, in the case of Stromer himself, observation bias, because by the time of Stromer's death, very little sauropod material was known from North Africa. So now we know a lot more. Excuse me. And essentially, we can tell that it was probably because they were feeding on different stuff. Some on fish like Spinosaurus, some on medium-sized animals like Rugops, and Carcharodontosaurids were basically very good sauropod slicers.
Hello to everyone on the Spinosaur team. It's really exciting to get the opportunity to ask you questions directly, especially for me because I am Raptor Chatter and I try and cover everything as best I can. And that includes things like taphonomy, and I think that this new Spinosaurus mirabilis has some really interesting taphofacies associated with it, at least based on what I read in the supplementary material, particularly in that there are very large cross-bedded sand dunes nearby. So what kind of environment specifically was this deposited in? Because it seems like it was a little bit more inland, yes, but also kind of how did it end up there? And that's a big part of this big taphonomic question that at least I have. Because we can't really understand what it was doing in its environment without better understanding how it ended up where it got buried. So where specifically was it buried, and how does that relate to the other rocks around it? Thanks, guys.
Alrighty. So we published on the paper a stratigraphy of of the locality on Jangevi.
Mm-hmm.
We know that at least one of the specimens, Gen 2, was buried in a not exactly articulated, but in an association good enough that it did not move a lot. That is, the neck was at the end of the neck, the head was at the end of the neck was at the end of the back, and right by the most posterior end of the back we found the limb material. So we know that that skeleton didn't move a lot. So it probably got buried where it died, most likely, or very close to where it died, very little transportation. We know that river system is not of high energy in the levels where we find the fossils because the sandstone is made by very, very, very little and fine grains. We don't find any large pebbles or rocks that were moved by high energy currents. We find those, not very huge rocks anyway, but we find thicker sand in levels above. So we know that the river had a very gentle current, and the sauropods are also in articulation. So we are pretty sure that all animals were buried very close to where they died.
Mm-hmm.
Great. On to Stephen from Your Dinosaurs Are Wrong. He has a few questions, so we'll split this up.
Hello, Elliot. Thank you for having me. And hello, Daniel. Thank you for fielding questions. I have 3 of them, and they concern the referred specimen with that tibia. Do the slightly longer length and the retention of a reduced medullary cavity in that tibia suggest that whatever forces were driving Aegyptiacus to have such short, solid leg bones weren't as impactful for Mirabilis? Is that just down to the new animal having a more riverine habitat, or is it some other factor?
Okay, it's a great question. I'm going to say that specimen is our youngest and smallest Spinosaurus mirabilis, so there is a huge chance that the longer tibia is not a product of how the adult would have looked, but how a juvenile would have looked. Because we know in Tyrannosaurs, for example, juveniles have this, ballet dancer, long legs, beautiful cursorial long limbs that in the adult, they grow less. I mean, the torso grows large at a higher rate than the lower limb does. So the adults have even though Tyrannosaurs have pretty long limbs relative to Allosaurids, for example, the adults still have stubbier, shorter limbs than the juveniles. So it is not unthinkable that Mirabilis, the tibia, the complete tibia we've got from Mirabilis, is from a smaller individual that could possibly and likely been a juvenile that still was growing. So maybe those proportions are not equal in the adult, but that's the information we have. So if you want me to point the finger, I will say that it's probably got to do more with ontogeny than to any specific adaptation of Spinosaurus mirabilis. Not so much for the reduced ascending process. I think that is just like it was pointed at the beginning, genetic operation that has no functional implication and just it's a mutation that just settled on this animal and kept on, because we have the huge ascending process also in juveniles of Suchomimus. So yeah.
In other theropods, as they grow, we see the wall of the long bones thickening at the expense of the marrow. And in at least some animals, we see a negative allometry to the length of the tibia. So given that this specimen is like 75% the size of the holotype of Mirabilis and like 60% the size of the neotype of Aegyptiacus, could these features be ontogenetic? My reason for asking is that I've seen a number of claims floating around that the new species is distinctly smaller than Aegyptiacus, like kind of a saltwater crocodile, freshwater crocodile situation. But the paper just says that the adult size is indeterminate because all of the specimens we have are immature. So I guess my question is there more we can learn from what we have about the age and growth of this animal and compare that to Aegyptiacus, or is that something that we have to wait and hope that more material surfaces?
All right, so yeah, I've answered before that, there's definitely an ontogenetic situation going on. However, the difference in size from the neotype of Spinosaurus Aegyptiacus and our tibia is not that great, meaning that the proportions between those two specimens would have to change a lot. So while I believe that the full-grown adults might have had a shorter tibia relative to the body, the neotype is not that far off. So I think there's still a chance that the tibia might have been slightly longer in Mirabilis. We still need to process a lot of the MNBH Gen 2 specimen, of which we have bags and bags of fragments that we need to puzzle over. We still have not had the chance to do that, and I believe we're going to learn, because this is a little bigger than Gen 4, the guy with the dentary and the tibia. So we are hoping to learn way more about the proportions of Mirabilis through this specimen. And I'm going to tease again, we have juvenile Spinosaurine, as I've hinted before, and we are going to be learning a lot from that specimen regarding the growth of Spinosaurines. So stay tuned.
Very excited for that. There were a few questions about bite force estimates in newtons and the strength of the neck muscles whiplash. That was from Stephen and Fatonian.
I'm going to gently decline that question and tease again that Evan Johnson Ransom is working on that, and there will be more information on that. So I think he's a better source for that question than I am, and let's hope until he gets it published.
Yes, and for just general bite force stuff, he's got a great paper which came out recently on theropods, and yeah, he's done lots of interviews about that.
Let's just leave it that both Spinosaurus species have weaker bite forces than something like a Tyrannosaur or a Carcharodontosaur, just because the way they're designed, they're essentially long beams, very nimble snouts. And given that the snout of Mirabilis is a little longer than the snout of Aegyptiacus, maybe it would have been a little more frail, but like I said, this is all speculation. I'll wait until Evan has done the research and published on it.
Paru Kerma asks, is the tail longer in New Spinosaur than the old one in the model? It looks shorter.
The tail is essentially the same. The only thing that is a little longer is the humerus, because inadvertently I updated those proportions after our new findings that I've been teasing the whole video. And since we have no forelimb material for Mirabilis, I just didn't notice that I had already modified our skeleton, and they just, sneaked their way there. But we have no evidence that on how the proportions of anything on the forelimb is. As for the tail, the vertebrae and their centra, they hold the same proportions overall than the ones we can compare from Aegyptiacus, so probably both tails would have been equally long. In length, in height, we have no idea on the sail of Mirabilis how high it would have been.
I have a few questions now on kind of taxonomy and evolution. Lee Brown, Paleoart, who actually, we can see his art on the screen, he was the first guest on this show, so it's nice to see him back. And this was a very quick piece of art which he did straight after the announcement.
I mean, it is beautiful.
It's gorgeous, like traditional, art. It's beautiful. He said, "I'd like to know why a dinosaur that already had a huge sail and large paddle-like tail, apparently not suited for swimming aid, so presumably a display structure, needs an additional exaggerated display structure. Is this because it evolved prior to the tail and sail, and wasn't detrimental to the animal and therefore kept it for some other reason?"
So like I said, we don't know if these features evolved from a purely sexual selection point, but I'm going to defer to a Simpsons quote as a good millennial. And actually I did a meme on it. I got it on Instagram. That episode when Lisa goes at war with Stacy Malibu because all the sexist stereotypes. And they just, she's going to produce her own doll, which is more empowered and feminist. And the company sees her as a threat. So we need something to compete with this girl's new doll, blah, 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 blah. And they go, okay, we're just going to put a new hat. And that's the meme. Oh, it's the same thing, but the hat's new. And basically, all I'm getting at is that probably that's the same way this structure evolved on. Like, it was sexually probably sexually selected because females would be like, yeah, it's another sail, another sail. Oh, look at that handsome guy with that beautiful scimitar crest. You know.
Look at that big look at that big horny guy.
Exactly. So it's the same thing as with the peacock sail or Megalosaurus, huge antlers. Probably it is something along those lines. We can't really tell, but that is the most likely scenario.
Joannes Jannar asks, I would love to know more about its relation to S. Aegypticus, as in, is it more derived or more basal? Which of its body parts have been found and which have been inferred based on other Spinosaurids, etc.?
So for the skull, we basically have all the front end. We are only inferring the shape of the postorbital region. That's a quick one. As for the body, we have cervical, dorsal, caudal, and hind limb elements that, in proportions and anything we can compare them to Spinosaurus aegypticus, they're almost identical. So we have essentially used Spinosaurus aegypticus as a blueprint to fit those remains because they are so identical. That doesn't mean that it's going to be completely identical. The more remains we will be uncovering, the better. But so far, all we can compare is almost indistinguishable. Now, as for which is more derived, that is an odd question because with only 2 species, they are sister taxa. I'm going to do a little quick cladistics, lecture, but I think it's going to be helpful. So let's have this phylogenetic tree, and let's suppose that this group here, I'm going to change color. So let's imagine that this group here is a genus with 3 species, A, B, and C. And we've got an outgroup here with a different genus, which is another group. Okay, so these are the ancestral species. These we don't have remains from. We don't know what they look like. We know that these 2 shared a closer ancestor between them than they share a close ancestor to A. Okay, so from this point we can tell that there's 2 states of derivation. There's 2 ancestors separating B and C from A, while there's only 1 ancestor separating B from C. So we can tell that B and C are more deeply nested and closely related to each other than they are to A, because they share more derived traits. So it's the traits that are derived or basal, not the specimens or the species. So these 2 share more derived features, and that's why those features would have appeared in this ancestor. Now, in the case of Spinosaurus mirabilis and Aegypticus, they are a sister group. Essentially means that they are in that B plus C scenario. What does it mean? It means that neither is more derived than the other. They're just different and they have one single common ancestor between them. The moment there are evidence of more Spinosaurus species, we will be able to tell, okay, these are more deeply nested than the others. But what we know for sure, because we have, head crest from other Spinosaurines, the scimitar-shaped crest is a more derived feature on mirabilis than on Aegypticus. That we know for sure, even though both have the most developed head crest in all Spinosaurids.
Great. Prize for the best username. War Kitty Cat asks, what was there more diversity in Spinosaurids in the African Cenomanian than we imagined?
I mean, this is evidence that the answer is yes, that there is more diversity than we know of. And, here and there's always discussion on, is all the Spinosaurid material from Morocco Aegypticus or not? And is the holotype from Egypt the same as the ones in Morocco or not? So the question here is that, again, what is shared between them and what differentiates them? I've seen some suggestions like, the thickness of the sail and some, minor differences here and there, but they are the same type of differences that we could not really decide to name Mirabilis on the first place in 2022. So those differences so far are very unlikely to be strong enough or to be robust enough to support a diagnosis of our different species in Egypt versus Morocco. That's why Spinosaurus moroccanus, which was a named species, fell out, because the evidence for its nature was not good enough. But I say we have to keep looking and we have to keep researching to really see how diverse Spinosaurus as a genus was, now that we have very good evidence of an additional species.
Wally Mayer, I suppose this is kind of like a cladistics taxonomy kind of misunderstanding. But I did see this quite a lot, saying this is the 20th new Spinosaurus of the last decade. I suppose the difference is Spinosaurus, Spinosaurid.
I mean, we've seen a very strong increment in Spinosaurus species, not in Spinosaurus, in Spinosaurid species in recent years, especially in the Iberian Peninsula. And there's some discussion to be made there, but that's a topic for another video. But yes, we are seeing their diversity explode. However, we are still seeing that because of a lot of field work in recent years. So it is normal. I mean, in Spain, which is where I'm from, there were no dinosaurs, or barely any fossils of dinosaurs, until 1980s, where fieldwork is starting to be conducted at higher and higher intensity. It's not that there were not dinosaurs here, it's that they had not been looked for. So I believe that field efforts are still extremely important to be conducted, to really see how many new species are out there. I think we are still even almost 150 years later than, more than, 200 years after the first dinosaurs has been named, we're still just scratching the surface of their diversity.
Absolutely. I love this line of questions. I've been waiting to hear you ask about it. In Visigoth asked the question, how did you keep this quiet for 7 years? Solga, why is there an at it looks bad? Very interesting name. Says, wow, new discovery. I'm definitely seeing for the first time now, and definitely didn't see leak months ago. Never heard of a scimitar crest Spinosaurus until now. That leads me on to the next question.
Hi, I'm Tyler Stone, a paleoartist and science communicator, and like a lot of people in our field, I first heard about Spinosaurus mirabilis at SVP 2024. Unfortunately, a lot of other people learned about it from photos that were leaked online before it was published, which is, to use the technical term, bad. I'm curious if these leaks had any impacts on the team or the research itself, how you responded to them, and how other people should respond if they see unpublished research being leaked online. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. This is something I love talking about because, wow, it was our Tom Holland moment. Like, okay, who the fuck leaked this? Like, how could this have happened? Because there's been only one leaked to my knowledge. I mean, earlier. Later in time, closer to the paper's release, and with a lot of people visiting Paul Sereno's lab in Chicago with the already reconstructed skull, there's been, and even the National Geographic photographer Keith Landzinski has also posted images of this animal weeks ago. So those are being recent leaks.
Yeah.
And I mean, the research was already very advanced at that point. But the OG leak that people are talking about, I'm going to share some images and a story that, to me, it was out of the world. So, picture myself, okay? At that point, the only person in the world who has digital fossils of Spinosaurus mirabilis is me. And the only copies are within my HDs and in my computer. And on my cloud and all that. But, I'm the only person who has access to those copies. I have not circulated anything but, some screenshots to Paul and other researchers. So, when you... I'm trying to find this image because I got the original leaked meme somewhere around here, but in any case, I wake up one morning, 2023, and I open Twitter, and as I open Twitter, I suddenly notice there is a meme. The classic meme of the woman screaming at her child, "Why can't you be normal?" And right there, a picture of my earliest reconstruction of Spinosaurus mirabilis.
Mm-hmm.
So you can figure, oh my god, where the hell did that come from? How is this possible? And that meme was using a picture from my screen in the desert because I have a work ethic which is unusual, and I will kill myself working late hours, not because nobody tells me I'm not exploited by any means, but I'm very passionate. And I worked my ass off because I really moved by fossils and I really love fossils. So when we discovered the first crest in Jangebi in 2022, I used my work and my rest hours, both the launch time and later at night the rest time, to put together. In my lunch hours, I would digitally scan the fossils with photogrammetry. I would process them through the evening. The computer would process them while I was excavating or looking for fossils. And back in the night at camp, I would put the thing together. I would use our 2022 skull reconstruction of Spinosaurus Aegyptiacus, and I swapped the maxilla because we already CT scanned those in Chicago years prior, and I added the crest. And I did that because I just felt like it. Nobody told me to, but I could show the team and our film crew what this new dinosaur looked like. This is a still shot from the film that was that is to be released at some point. That's my hat. This is me. This is my hand. By the way, I was wearing a cast because my baby wrist was suffering from all the hammering. That's my computer. This is the office tent, and here is the 2022 skull reconstruction of Aegyptiacus, and my very crude reconstruction of mirabilis. Without the teeth, with a lot of, poorly modeled skull, just so people could see what difference it makes. Now, I open Twitter and I find that, and I'm like, how the hell did this leak? Because what I was seeing was a very poor, I knew right off the bat that nobody had hacked me because it was not a good quality image. And so somebody had to take a picture of my my screen. So it turns out, while all the people gathered in my in the tent behind me and I showed them what the thing looks like, they were like, oh, I'm gonna take a picture for me. And what happened was we made a Google Drive folder so we all could dump our pictures and, see pictures we were in or moments that we missed, that kind of deal. And yes, there was a picture of my screen with that early reconstruction. Another team member would give a small presentation to his co-workers on what he'd done in the expedition. And he included that Spinosaurus image because, hey, we found this and we found that. I mean, it was just one slide of many. Somebody attending the talk essentially took like 100 or 150 pictures, basically one of each slide with my body in it, giving the presentation. Uploaded those to Facebook. And some person went through all those 150 and was like, what the fuck? And massively distributed the image because the Facebook image had 10 likes. It's not like it went viral, but somebody saw that picture, posted it either on Discord or Reddit, I don't know where it originated, and from there it blew off. So, how does it affect the research? The research itself, not so bad because, it's just information that it's out. And while there's always risk that people who have the same fossil are going to, let's speed this thing up because they're going to beat us to the punch, we know nobody else had ever gone into that area, so we were not afraid of that. Although it has happened, by the way, in somewhat recent times. What we were worried about was that major journals like, Science, where we've published it, or Nature, or Cell that has current biology, those journals, all journals have a very strict embargo policy that they want to have the exclusive rights to put this thing out. So if it leaks out, the risk is that editors are going to learn about it and they will be like, yeah, that thing is everywhere, everybody knows about it, why should we publish it if everybody already knows about it? So that's the risk. For us, early stage career researchers, the risk is that publishing in top-tier journals like Science, Nature have important curriculum value for our careers. And if we lose one of those publications, we may not get a job. So leaking unpublished information can potentially have consequences, especially for the most vulnerable researchers. For somebody like Paul, for example, yeah, it's a science paper he's not going to get, but his job is not on the line. Maybe a research grant might be on the line, but he won't be out of a job because of it. But some younger, more vulnerable researcher might be out of a job for it. So yeah, treat leaks delicately because they may impact somebody's career.
Yeah. And on that note, we just had a couple of questions about paleontology careers. One person asked, as a recent paleontology graduate, I'm very interested in participating in international field expeditions, like the one you conducted in the African desert. What path would you recommend for someone at my stage to become involved in this kind of research? And could you share a bit about how you personally became part of this expedition?
Whoa. Okay. So first part, what stage was he talking about? High school or already in college?
Yeah, with recent paleontology graduate is all they said, so I'm assuming.
Okay, great. So, advice. Number one. If you're not from a hot country like, Mediterranean country or, southern United States or Mexico, or, if you're not accustomed to heat, I would recommend to get a lot of field experience in, if you're from Europe, Spain or Portugal will do because they're extremely hot in the field season. But you are not in the middle of nowhere, so if you are, prone to heat stroke or dehydration, you're going to be close to medical attendance. So you will know how your body reacts to that kind of field work. So I recommend
It is a
searching for
very
fieldwork.
it is a very intense situation to put yourself under. I understand.
Absolutely, because you're in the middle of nowhere, and if you are in need of medical attention that is not basic first aid. I mean, I'm trained in first aid, but even if we had a doctor with us, what can they do in the middle of nowhere without laboratory equipment or all the things that you've got in a hospital? It's very complicated to do anything beyond first aid. So if you need medical attention or you have problem with heat, we can dial it back. But if you need to be in a hospital, that's going to be harder. So I recommend getting experience in similar conditions, though in less isolated environments. So in case you're vulnerable, you'll know it right before. Now, field experience, very important. An expedition like this is different from your regular, excavation campaigns where, say, a sauropod. We can stay 10 years excavating the same sauropod because we know that we're going to get funding every year to go back. We can take less experience as students because they can learn how to work with a big fragile specimen. And that's okay. Those kind of campaigns are okay for that scenario, but here we never know when we are going to be able to go back. So anything we set up to collect, we have to whole asset, which means we have to collect a whole sauropod. And we got to the point where we collected 6 of them in 3 weeks. So we really have to be very experienced at that kind of work. So I recommend, having a good amount of experience. And to tell my personal story on how I became involved, I never, ever looked for it. Like, I didn't push for... And I feel bad. I've always felt really bad because I know there's a lot of people who want really to become involved in these expeditions. It's something that I also wanted to become involved, but my approach to it was always like, Daniel, you're a nobody. You're just another graduate student. There's got to be 1,000 like you who want to have this kind of experience. I mean, how many letters or emails is Paul Sereno or Nizar Ibrahim getting to volunteer for an expedition like that? It's got to be in the thousands, and there's people who are better at you at this. Okay. So to me, it happened by sheer accident. In 2016, that's 10 years ago, I met Paul in a conference. I was working with Spinosaurus, which is a sauropod dinosaur from Niger. So he was interested in it. And he told me, I got so many sauropods in Chicago that come from Niger and are still in need of study. You're welcome to come at any time and take a look at them. I wanted to look at Jobaria, and he still has some specimens of Jobaria in Chicago that are still being worked on. So next year I got a small grant so I could visit his collection among others in the US. And let me tell you something about Paul. I think I might have told this already, but I'm going to tell you again. It is usual when you visit a collection to have, the curator or the collection manager, take you one day out for a coffee or maybe to have lunch, to get to know each other. What are your research interests? I mean, just a little networking. It's very common for the most part. But Paul, he went not the next level, but the next 10 levels. He invited me several times to have lunch. He even invited me to his house and cooked dinner for me. I mean, I was a total stranger to him. So I found that very interesting. And to him, I must have been, probably what I've told myself, working late hours in the expedition probably tells you a lot of how I worked in Paul's collection when I was there. So he probably thought that I was a good candidate for an expedition, and he just bluntly offered it to me. But I have to say, and I went in 2018, I performed as expected, so I returned in 2019, then 2022 and last year 2025 in Brazil. So I think that in my case, it's that I clicked very well with Paul and that we have very similar work ethics and habits, as unhealthy as they might be, like working long hours. They are very unhealthy and I don't recommend them to anybody.
You
But it's just
emailed
the
me
way
at 3
I'm
a.m.
wired.
last night, and I said, "Oh yeah, I saw it because I was also up at 3 a.m."
Yeah,
if I ever look tired in my videos,
for the sauropod people, for all those guys who are so interested in sauropods, you know what I was doing last Friday night? I stayed up until 5 a.m. doing figures for the sauropod paper.
Yeah,
Friday night. Yeah, other people go to get drunk or have dinner. I'm just a weirdo. Who likes that?
You're very cool. You're very cool.
Well, anyway, but there's people who have make their way to Paul through, let's say names. I think it's okay. Filippo Bertozzo, for example, contacted me because he has a direct interest in ornithopods. We didn't have an ornithopod specialist, and I very happily referred him to Paul. This is not a call for referrals, okay? I don't want my mailbox drowned in referrals. I suggest you write if you're experienced enough, but have a good amount of experience. Ideally, go to any paleontological conference or gathering where you can talk in person, which is the way Filippo, for example, asked me instead of just sending me a cold email. I think
that's how I met Filippo.
Somebody...
He was on the show, the previous video. So yeah,
that's what I'm referencing him.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
he's well known among. So I recommend approach people in the proper environment, which is, I think, professional channels.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you see somebody in the street, you don't go ask for such a question. But yeah, I think that breaking the digital barrier and being more personal, talking face to face, I think that helps a lot. See if you are, because you can spend hours writing an email, but when you have to talk about your experience and what you know, what you don't know, it's easier to convey that you're familiar and willed to be good at it. So yeah, that's my advice. Get experience and go to the professional channels and gatherings to really sell you out.
Yeah, and this is not from a paleontologist's perspective, but as somebody who worked in like TV production as a freelancer who had to work and mingle with lots of people, and doing this, I was at SVP, DinoCol, Pal, Ass. I'll be at this week and this year, and Lyme Regis. Just mingling with people in person is really important for anything, but also just go into it thinking, like, I never approached anyone at any of the events thinking, oh god, I want to bid them for a video. I was always just like, oh, if the opportunity arises itself, I'll chat to them, we'll hang out. Don't pressure people sometimes, and don't go after people above your station necessarily. Like, sometimes if it naturally happens, it happens.
Exactly.
But don't badger people. If you've got people on the same level as you or early career researchers, they're people who are going to be doing amazing work. But now, some of the work people are doing now is amazing. What they're going to be doing in 5-10 years is amazing. Don't be scared of people who are in a similar position as you, because they are all very interesting and enthusiastic people, and you never know what's going to come of it.
And don't be scared of people who are, very at the end of their careers after a very successful career, because at some point they were a nobody who felt just like everybody else at the beginning. Everybody.
I think everyone just wants to feel like a normal person at these events and hang out. So just don't treat people like celebrities. Just normal human beings. Have dinner with them if the opportunity arises.
Piece of advice.
Yeah, for sure. Great. I think that's the end of that, but I will end it on a question from Ashley Hall.
Hey Daniel, it's Ashley Hall here, and I want to know what you want to know about Spinosaurus. Thanks so much.
I mean, it's so lovely to see Ashley. I've known her for almost 10 years already, and I remember visiting Cleveland, the collection in Cleveland, that same trip where I got invited to participate in the Niger expedition, and I remember meeting with her and having lunch with the curator at the Cleveland Museum at the time. So great to see her. So frankly, my go-to right now, what I really want to know, it's the exact proportions of the forelimb, because I've worked really hard in doing that skeleton reconstruction, only for it to be obliterated by recent finds that we are working on, and ditto for, and I'm talking about the arm, just the arm. So I just wish we find at some point, either for Mirabilis or for Aegyptiacus, a specimen that includes vertebrae, at least. I mean, hopefully it would be the whole skeleton, but just enough bones of the hands, radius ulna, and humerus, and some vertebrae, so that we can really settle down how big the arm is relative to the body. That is my biggest want to know, because I've puzzled so hard about those proportions that I just need to know for real.
Yeah. The video we did, just the way you mentioned the people on the way and kind of shone the light on various people upon the journey is really important.
I don't know if you know this, but we have had criticisms from some paleontologists in the dinosaur mailing list because we had too many authors. And other people, I mean, we did not enter the discussion, but other people started saying, that's more accurate to the reality of a paleontological find than what most people do, which is, technicians, artists, excavators, they tend to get sidelined with only 2, 3, 4 authors, and that's common practice in the field even nowadays. Back in the days of Marsh, Cope, Brown, they were single authored papers, but all the illustrations were not done by Marsh and Cope. Well, maybe Cope did some of his illustrations, but Marsh certainly did not. And there was a discussion, but these get paid. Yeah, you pay an artist and you pay a technician. Okay, fine. But what about the volunteers who spend long hours looking for fossils, or that person that has access to information that you don't have and provides it for free? How you compensate them? I've mentioned before that we paleontologists and in academia need publications to have good curricula for getting jobs. It's the least you can do if you spend 3 months in the desert for free.
Yeah, I think it's a big misconception with a lot of paleontology. I mean, we had this a lot in the comments of, this was found 7 years ago, why are we only hearing about it now? And just the complete misunderstanding. And it's understandable, because that's what Jurassic Park shows you. You dig it out of the ground, you know what it is, and hey presto, you describe
boom,
new species.
To the next. No.
On to the next one. But it's a massive operation.
Let's try to make this into the video too.
Yeah.
For all those people bitching about the sauropods. Okay, it is very beautiful to go to the AMNH collection and look at the beautiful big prepped skeletons that are there. But I remind you, there's still specimens from the Dinosaur National Monument in museums, still in their jackets, waiting to be prepared. And it's been more than 100 years for that to happen. Sauropods are beautiful. They are a marvel of evolution, and because they are such marvel of evolution and they're big and fragile, they take a lot of time to prepare out of the jackets, to stabilize them, and to study. And time and delicate means expert technicians, which means money. It is very, very expensive to prepare a sauropod. And that's why one of the sauropods that I'm working on in Niger was found in the year 2000. That's 26 years ago. And we're still prepping it, and we're still doing the research on it just to know what it is. So yeah, sauropods are not the easiest of materials to work on. So I ask everybody patience on the sauropods because they are complicated. Not just because their anatomy is complicated, it's because just dealing with them is complicated in a lot of ways.
Yes. But to finish the point, it's big operations, involves a lot of people, a lot of expertise, a lot of training. So if we can, I love the fact that the paper had so many authors. I'm glad that in the video and the documentary, you're showing people's faces and shining lights on them. Something I'm trying to do on this show, just shine a light on everyone at every stage. And it's great to see it happening on the other side of things as well. Anything else, or are we done?
I mean, after 3 hours, I think we are pretty.
If anyone has any more questions,
pretty much covered it up.
Drop them in the comments, and maybe we'll do a part 3. Who knows? But I think maybe we're done. We can always respond to comments. Via text, we can reply to things. And as Daniel said, this isn't the only thing he's been involved with. Certainly not the only thing from this site. So hopefully you'll be back in future and we will discuss those when they come along. So,
I'll be delighted to come. I have a lot of fun when I'm here.
Great. Very good to hear. Dan, sign off. Anything you want to say before you go? Closing remarks, and plug yourself.
I want to say thank you, everybody, for all the engagement, all the questions, all the art. For this lonely kid who loved dinosaurs and could not share his passion with anybody until he was much older, it's very touching to see something I was part of discovering has reached so many people. So thank you. Thank you from the deepest of my heart.
When I heard this, when it reached me that this was a paper that was coming out, I remember feeling so much pressure because I was just looking at it, because the video did very well for my channel's, standards, 20-second most hype, 200,000 views. I remember receiving it and thinking, God, what a amazing discovery. What a fun thing. Just the fact there's a Spinosaurus skull, let alone the crest, let alone where it was found. And thinking, God, if this doesn't do big numbers, I really screwed up this video. So it was very it was very
pretty obvious that you succeeded.
It was it would have been an absolute travesty if it hadn't done well, because of the work you guys have done, because of the animations, because of the art, because of the amazing preparation and reconstructions. You gave the video to me on a plate, basically. It couldn't have been a more perfect story. So yeah, thank you from my perspective as well, and thank you, Daniel, for all your work and everyone on the team.
You're really welcome. And like I said, I'll be very glad to come back anytime.
Great. Links to Daniel elsewhere on the internet will be in the description. And thank you, everyone. Subscribe if you haven't already. If you made it this far into the video, please subscribe. Oh my God. And
subscribe, like, and share.
And hype it. Apparently, that's the thing that people do. And the Spinosaurus isn't the only thing on this channel. Lots of other prehistoric and extant stuff coming. So, the natural world is amazing. Please join us on the journey and see you all soon. Bye, Daniel.
Ciao.